Okay, so keeping myself ahead of the game is a lot about finding places where you're not the smartest person in the room. So, going and putting myself in situations where I actually feel really scared and nervous about doing the work. So, actually putting myself in a situation, I will write this article for this publication. And I'm so scared. How am I going to write it? I will say that I am going to get this book out in 3 months. And I'm so scared how I'm going to do this. Ahead of the game is all about always being in this thing of how am I going to do it? If I'm today don't have one thing that I'm really nervous or uncomfortable about, then I'm actually becoming totally comfortable. There's always something that I'm super nervous about, super nervous about. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Comfort is a beautiful place, but sadly nothing grows there. So, it's just always trying to, I can't sit still. I have to look for okay, what's the next challenge? What's the next challenge? What's the next challenge? And I enjoy that. So the point here was no one is going to call me and say, hey, Anjali, we have the TED Talk stage ready for you. Do you want to come up and speak? It's not happening.
Hey listeners, welcome back. This is Inspire Someone Today, coming to you with a special 4 back-to-back episodes for this month of August. You're wondering why 4? Yes, there is a reason, my friends. The reason is we are celebrating the first anniversary of Inspire Someone Today and a huge milestone of 100,000 downloads for Inspire Someone Today. This couldn't have been possible if not for the support from all of you wonderful listeners. So thank you so much. And to celebrate these 4 back-to-back episodes, I have the first episode lined up. Joining me today is somebody who specializes in stories. We all grew up on the staple diet of stories, but here is someone who is changing the landscape of organizations through storytelling. It's an absolute joy to welcome the energetic and full of life Anjali Sharma on Inspire Someone Today. Anjali, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you and heartiest congratulations on the 1-year anniversary and 100,000 downloads. My God, that's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. How are you doing today, Anjali?
I'm very well. Thank you. Thank you for asking. And I assume a lot of your listeners are from India. I'm thinking about all of you, even though I'm speaking to you from Singapore. India is my ghar. Okay. So I am thinking of all of you.
So Garka Beti is joining us.
It is home. Nothing can take that away. I'll always be an Indian at heart.
So with that, without much further ado, let's hear the story of the storyteller.
So, Shrikant, my story is not like some magical major story. It's a story that many people can relate to. I left India somewhere when I was about just turning 20. I came to Singapore to fly for Singapore Airlines as a flight attendant and did that for a little bit and enjoyed that. But I was also sort of itching to do something that would, mentally stimulate me. And that started my sort of work with other industries after leaving the airline industry. I worked in Singapore for a bit and then I went to Australia and worked there for about 6.5 years. Then came back to Singapore again in the year 2010. And my career sort of spanned in working from advertising to brand experience to hospitality and all those sorts of things. But I think the biggest turning point for me happened in the year 2012. In 2012, I was a business director for a fairly well-known brand, advertising brand. And that was the first year that I was questioning a little bit too much in the office. What I mean by that was if we would be working on a creative pitch and someone would say to me, well, we can't do this because the brand guardian doesn't allow this, I would actually want to speak to the brand guardian only to recognize that when people refer to a brand guardian, what they're referring to is a book that is a guideline book that has been created many years ago. So I actually couldn't have a discussion with this thing called a book because a book said this is what it is. It didn't take any sort of exceptions to the rule in place. So I think that year was the first year where I felt like if I want to leap, if I want to make a ruckus, if I want to add value, I have to have autonomy. And that was probably also the very first year where I actually really stopped and asked myself, what is it that is my talent? What is it that I'm gifted with? Because up until then, I was very happy doing really well in the corporate space. But then was the first time where I questioned a little bit of that. And whichever conversation I had, whatever dots I connected, everything led to storytelling. And that was the year I set up Narrative, the Business of Stories. And since then, we've come a long way. We work with very, very large organizations, helping them tell their organizational transformation story. So, the practice has been going since then and has done some very remarkable projects, which I'm very proud of.
Wonderful. What a powerful question that was to trigger you into this journey.
Yeah.
So we have all heard about storytelling. We have heard about business storytelling, but corporate storytelling is different. What is it and why is it important?
This is an interesting question because corporate storytelling is not something that is actually understood to the nuance that it should be. Now, what do I mean by that? So, storytelling, movies are also a form of storytelling. In India, we love movies, but that form of storytelling is made with a very simple purpose of entertainment. And of course, it kind of has the revenue side of things as well. But the primary reason why someone chooses to go and watch a movie is for the entertainment purpose. Now, when you stand up on a stage and you give a speech is also a form of storytelling. When you write a book and you tell a story is also a form of storytelling. But corporate storytelling is none of that. Corporate storytelling is storytelling that you do to get the people within the organization to align with you, not just agree with you, align with you. What that means is if I say to you, Shrikant, you know what? Learning artificial intelligence is really important. You're not going to disagree with me. You're going to agree with me and you're going to say, yeah, I agree with you, Anjali. It is important. But the question is, are you going to get up and do something to be able to learn something about artificial intelligence? So agreement is not alignment. Agreement is I nod my head and I say, yeah, okay, yeah, you're right. And I agree with you. But that is not enough for me to get up and move into the right direction. So corporate storytelling does exactly that job. It actually shifts your agreement into an alignment and sometimes your disagreement into an alignment and gets you to move into the right direction. So now, if I tell you, Shrikant, artificial intelligence is really important, and I tell that in a story format, you're going to say, what's the first step I can take to learn about artificial intelligence? So corporate storytelling is a storytelling to move the people into the right direction so that we can achieve the desired outcome. Now, the biggest catalyst of corporate storytelling is that the teller also ends up achieving a lot of personal success through the journey. So what happens is if Shrikant gets up and tells the story, not only he moves people into the right direction, people also start believing in Shrikant and his vision.
Wow, that's profound. This is like what Ramcharan says in execution is taking that thought to finish, which is taking that alignment into action mode.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Wonderful. So if the listeners out here are listening to this and they're wondering, saying that, okay, what is this all about? So I hear this out. This sounds intriguing, but what is that I can do to put it into practice?
So, just like you studied maths and you studied science and you studied economics, storytelling is something you need to engage with. But more than study with it, you have to do the practical of it because storytelling is like a tacit knowledge. So, what is a tacit knowledge? Tacit knowledge is something like riding a bike or singing a song or skiing or playing football. Nobody ever really learned how to ski by just reading a manual on it. Nobody ever learned how to sing a song by just actually reading a book on singing. You actually have to sing and you actually have to ski and you actually have to play football. Wherein, if I told you, hey, Singapore is in Southeast Asia, you can learn that without having to move yourself at all. You don't have to do anything and you can gain that knowledge. That is implicit knowledge. Storytelling is tacit knowledge, which you can only gain by doing. So, those people who are really interested in storytelling, I think the question is not how do you master it, because mastery is a while away. I think the question is where do you begin it? What do you do to get started with it? Because you may realize that after half a milestone that this is going to be slightly different to what I wanted to do. So if you want to gain mastery in storytelling, the place to begin is exactly the place where good writers begin. Good writers begin by good reading. If you want to be a good writer, you have to read a lot. If you want to be a good storyteller, you have to listen to a story a lot. So I think you have to have this desire to want to indulge in listening to stories. Now, listening to stories, you have to be able to listen to various kinds of stories. So, in corporate storytelling, I think reading nonfiction books, you can fulfill the desire to read and listen to like a business podcast. You can listen to a lot of stories there. But I would also recommend that if you really want to create a niche for yourself in a corporate, don't just stick to the world of business. Don't stick to the world of, nonfiction and business podcast. If you want to create your own niche and stand out and be different, which is what I've noticed for myself, you also have to be able to listen to a deeply emotional story. And you then start to cross pollinate ideas. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that when I watch stories and documentaries, I learn a lot from those documentaries that I then apply to my corporate storytelling work. And because there is no such application that has happened before in corporate storytelling work, it becomes refreshing, new, innovative, something that's not been done before. So I think begin with listening, but wide listening. Because if you just stick to business podcasts and nonfiction books and stuff like that, what you will notice is that you will make your storytelling extremely rational. And if you just listen to emotional style storytelling, which is what happens on stages and happens in movies and novels, you become very emotional style storytelling. A corporate world needs a fine balance between the two.
So, what your underlying theme that you're alluding to is the diversity of process or diversity of learnings that one can practice to kind of get to be better storytellers or good storytellers.
Yeah, so the simple message is to be a good storyteller, be a good story listener. When you become made the mindset that I'm going to be a good story listener, you really go into the diverse aspect of storytelling. Don't just because I want to be a corporate storyteller, I only listen to corporate storytelling. I want to be a movie maker, so I only listen to movie making. Make sure you listen to a diverse style of storytelling, and you will see how through that cross pollination that happens in your head, you form your own niche.
And Anjali, during this process, what changes have you seen happen to you itself? When you look at a story, is it a new perspective that you have developed? So, what kind of comes to your mind now compared to what Anjali was, say, probably about 10 years back?
I think, there's been a huge amount of reflection on this question for me over the last 3, 4 years. Obviously, I come from a corporate background. So my whole thought process about corporate was keep it rational, keep it practical, keep it logical, keep it methodical, right? Keep the stories like that. And when people did highly emotional storytelling, I used to get like, there's no space for all of that here. Why are you doing things like that? But I think when I look at myself 3, 4 years ago, I was a bit like that. But today, I am not like that. I actually want to understand humans and not just talk about stories that are extremely practical, logical, and methodical. For example, what I mean by that is if we see lack of adoption for a new digital transformation that we have introduced into an organization, rather than just telling a story for adoption, my first place would be actually to really empathize and try and understand why there is lack of adoption, and not just through opinions and surveys and stuff like that. I actually want to create an emotional connect with people. I actually want to get stories out of them to understand their worldviews and see whether they are feeling embarrassed about something, or whether they are feeling like this is going to, take a lot of my time away thing, or whether they're feeling like this is going to cost me my future thing. So I think the difference is that I started with storytelling with a very practical, logical, sort of rational approach because it was in the corporate world. But today, where I stand, I have learned to excite the mind, but also provide a route to the heart to want to change. So I've struck a fine balance between the two.
So, for all the curious listeners out there, the question is how did Anjali start all of this? And what practices did she adapt to get to the point that she is here?
Well, I still think I've got miles to go, Shrikant. But let's talk about so far. So when you ask about how did it all start, I think I mentioned in the previous story that it sort of started with I actually really wanted Once I recognized I'm a creative and I need autonomy, I started my own practice. But after you start something like that, how do you sustain it and how do you keep it going? I'm a huge fan of discipline and habits and structures in terms of living life. So, habits are so boring, right? Because you repeat them over and over again and over and over again, over and over. But habits are also extremely rewarding because it's that constant, consistent repeat that actually leads to mastery. So there are certain habits I have that I think I credit for whatever I have been able to get to so far.
And is it natural or is it a practice that you adapt to kind of remember so many stories, to have a repository of quotes, stories, people? How do you bring it all to the fore for that moment, for that particular instance?
There's a few parts to this question that you've just asked me. So, one of the advantages we have with stories is that stories are naturally very memorable, Shrikant. And there's a science behind this, right? Now, think of when you were little, about, 7 or 8, you would have watched a movie or heard a story. You would not forget that story. It's sort of, it remains in your mind. The plot remains in your mind that's what happens. So the reason why stories are memorable is scientifically there's a reason, right? They're a combination of an emotion, they're a combination of emotion, place, and an image. And anything that is a combination of emotion, image, and a place naturally gets stored into our memory. So if I tell you a story, it will most likely be at some place that it would have taken place. Story will naturally have like an emotion in it. Oh, I felt scared and it was really disappointing and I felt really angry. And then there will be an image that I will trigger in your head. So for example, if I say to you, oh, I landed at the airport and there was no one there, you are now going to actually visualize an airport in your imagination. Or if I say to you, oh, I love the Bangalore airport, I can just land there and get out of there very, very quickly. But what I don't love is the long, long drives before I can actually get to my destination within Bangalore and the traffic situation there. Now, the moment I say that, it'll activate your visualization about the traffic in Bangalore. So stories are a combination of an image, a place, and an emotion. And once you have those three things, anything becomes memorable. Okay. So that's an added advantage we have with stories. Unlike bullet points, unlike numbers, unlike thumbnails that we put on PowerPoints, they're not memorable. Now, once you have that natural advantage, the next thing is that how do you collect all those stories and where do they go? Okay. So here's when I spoke about habits before. Here are certain habits I have that help me. So, writing has been a habit for me since 2014. Since 2014, I have written every single day, even if it is just 3 or 4 lines. Of course, not the weekends, but during the weekdays, it's a habit to write. I may or may not publish what I've written, but I will write every single day. It's not something I need to show to someone. It's not something I need to share with someone, but I have a habit to write. Now, that writing absolutely captures a lot of the stories that I want to tell. The other thing is that, on a weekly basis, for example, I'm reading a book right now and I found a really lovely story in it. Every week, I will capture that story in a video and I keep that. Now, some people think that is a bank I can refer back to. My writing is a bank I can refer back to. My videos are a bank I can refer back to. Absolutely wrong. That's not the case. The point here is that when I have to write something, I have to think damn hard about how I'm going to structure this writing, how I'm going to start it, how I'm going to edit it, how I'm going to clear it, I'm going to do that. Time that I spend on putting that write up together is enough of an engagement with that story that never leaves my mind. They say the long race you'll never forget, the hard climbs you never forget, the delay of a flight you'll never forget. So there's something called emotional labor. You exert emotional labor in getting that write up ready. So I'll never forget that. Writing is just the end product is just subset. It's the process that ingrains it into me. Same thing as with the videos. I do my videos in one shot. So they have to be a one take video and I have to tell the whole story in one take. I will repeat my takes until I get that story right. The idea is not for millions of people to watch it and for me to feel really great about myself looking at the video. The idea is I have to have enough clarity about that story to be able to tell it in one take and know enough about it. that process of repeating it over and over and over and over again is what puts it into my memory. So I'm more in love with the process of writing and the process of video making. It's a different thing that a lot of my clients come to me because of the end product. But I learn and become who I am because of the process involved.
I would want to introduce to a rapid fire round.
Oh, go for it.
Are we ready for the rapid fire round? Great. What is Anjali doing when not telling stories?
Oh, spending time with my 3 kids, 1 daughter and 2 fur dogs, 2 dogs.
Nice. What has been the best story that you have ever heard?
One of my favorite stories is told by Anita Roddick, who's no more, and the founder of Body Shop. That's a story I always remember.
What have you learned from your failures?
That failure is just a learning opportunity. It's not a failure.
Beautiful. We did touch upon habits and routines. What habits that has helped you in your journey that you are very, very passionate about?
One of the thing about habits for me, obviously, is never to miss a streak, right? So what I mean by that is that there are certain things I'll do every day and I don't miss a streak, right? I feel like if I miss one day, it can be because of something that really, was an issue. But if I miss 2 days, then I'm actually getting comfortable not doing it and I'm being lazy. So what are my habits? Reading every day. I read every single day, writing every single day, exercising almost every single day, and spending time, making conscious effort to spend time with my family every single day. Non-negotiable. Everything else comes and goes, but these don't leave. They stay.
Super. And the last question, how do you keep yourself ahead of the game?
Okay, so keeping myself ahead of the game is a lot about finding places where you're not the smartest person in the room. So, going and putting myself in situations where I actually feel really scared and nervous about doing the work. So, actually putting myself in a situation, I will write this article for this publication. And I'm so scared. How am I going to write it? I will say that I am going to get this book out in 3 months. And I'm so scared how I'm going to do this. Ahead of the game is all about always being in this thing of how am I going to do it? If I'm today don't have one thing that I'm really nervous or uncomfortable about, then I'm actually becoming totally comfortable. There's always something that I'm super nervous about, super nervous about.
So in a way, is it about challenging your own comfort zone?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Comfort is a beautiful place, but sadly nothing grows there. So, it's just always trying to, I can't sit still. I have to look for like, okay, what's the next challenge? What's the next challenge? What's the next challenge? And I enjoy that.
Great. So before we slipped into the rapid fire round, we did talk about you sharing couple of stories that you have kind of seen, which is maybe from an organization building or transformation standpoint, or impacts on business through storytelling. What one or two stories that you can share with us in this area?
Yeah. Okay. So I must warn you before I tell you the organizational storytelling that organizational storytellings are not as, lovely and as interesting as the other styles of storytelling are, because corporate stories are very much told for the purpose of what it is. But, I'll share a few with you, like the ones that I actually have used. There's one that I would tell you, which I used when I was trying to get teams from various parts of the world to work together. So what was happening was there's this company where there are people in Japan, there are people in India, there are people in Sri Lanka, and then there are people in Vietnam, and then there are people in the US. So every time these people would get together, and there was also always this hesitancy amongst people for whom English was not the first language to feel slightly nervous on the calls and feel like, we don't have that challenge as much in India because we all speak English there. But, when you look at other geographies like Japan and Vietnam and all, it becomes really, really difficult. So I was really trying to figure out how do I get these people comfortable in their own skin to just kind of say to people, I don't really understand what you mean by that. Can you explain that to me? Can you elaborate rather than just nodding head to what the American counterparts were saying and then after the end of the call feel really confused? So one of the stories that I told that made the difference in them was that I actually put out this photo of Indira Nooyi, who is the ex-CEO of PepsiCo. And I put out the photo of this very well-known author and speaker, Dr. Brene Brown. And I started telling them this story. I said, when Brene Brown, she's very famous in America, and a lot of people who study shame and vulnerability will know her. She's author of many best-selling books. I said, she's a very famous lady, but let me tell you what happened with her. The first time she was asked to speak in an event. So she went to speak at an event and she was in the green room at the back of the stage. And she and one of the guys who was also invited were getting ready. And there was still time for the event to begin. So what she did was she actually went and just sort of looked through the curtains at the audience. And she just had like this moment of freeze because she saw like these like over 200 people. They were mostly men in suits, salt and pepper hair, and they looked like such business tycoons. And she just went like, oh my God, who are these people that I'm speaking to today? I feel so nervous. So she went back to the green room, and this other guy who was going to speak with her, he said, Renee, are you okay? And she's like, oh my God, who are these people? I feel really, really nervous. And he's like, weren't you told they're sea level people? And she's like, yeah, but when they said sea level people, I thought they're like the sea, water sea, like equal sea level, down to earth people. I didn't understand that sea level means like, CEO and CTO. I don't know this term, sea level. Then the guy said, oh, okay, but sea level actually means, they're very senior people. And she's like, I learned after becoming an expert and writing a book, what does sea level mean? So it's not essential for you to know everything. I took an example of Indira Nooyi, and Indira Nooyi, when she first went to study in the Yale University, she tells this story and she says, I'm a vegetarian and I went around telling people, I want yogurt, I want yogurt, I want yogurt because I need to substitute for my protein from somewhere. I don't eat meat. And everybody would be looking at it and going, no, I want curd, I want curd, I want curd. And people are like, what is curd? I don't know what is curd. And she's like, I spent so many days trying to figure out what is curd. Why can't they understand what is curd? And then somebody turned around and said, it's just yogurt. Just say yogurt. And she's like, oh, is yogurt also curd? And this is her in university. And she is so accomplished. So the point I was making through these funny stories that I was telling about famous people was telling people that it is not mandatory for you to know everything. So when you don't know, just get up and say, I don't know. And, it was sort of a license for people to start saying in the meetings that I don't know, I really don't know. And it's no big deal that I don't know. And I think these stories gave them a lot of confidence to sort of start. And I just told you a couple of them, but there were so many that I told of very famous people to actually shift people's mindset. So, I can continue telling stories. That's what I do for my living. But, I'll let you have a time check. If you want me to tell a few more, I can, but otherwise we'll continue.
And this is so enthralling. Thank you for sharing that story. And for somebody who has worked in multiple countries, established a successful business, what does it take to succeed in a global ecosystem?
I'm still navigating those paths, but I will tell you what it takes and what I've learned so far. Okay. I think there's this whole notion of somebody from America will call me one day, and somebody from the United Kingdom will call me one day, and I will have this amazing platform to do my work. The truth is, no one is coming. Okay. No one is coming. That is the reality. So then, if no one is coming, what can you do to get closer to them? That's the question, right? So, talk about you, Shrikant. You got to know me through a LinkedIn connection. This morning, 6 o'clock, I was giving a podcast interview in Boston, got to know me through my YouTube channel. Yesterday, I had an email from someone from Australia who's a government crisis management leader who said, I'm writing content for crisis leadership. Can I give the link of an article you have written on crisis leadership and storytelling in my content? Do I have your permission to provide that link? Through my writing, they came to that. So the point here was, no one is going to call me and say, hey, Anjali, we have the TED Talk stage ready for you. Do you want to come up and speak? It's not happening. It's never going to happen. Then the question becomes, how do you get there? And we are so lucky today that we have so many platforms to put our work. Shrikant, what you are doing, nobody's paying you to do these podcasts. You're doing this from your own desire to want to make a change happen. You're getting closer to people by letting them know about your presence and your existence. I do that with my writing, with my video making, with my the content that I share regularly. I got closer to people. And when you produce that content in whichever format, it is not about the quality, it is about the consistency and frequency. How consistently you show up and how frequently you show up. Once you get that consistency and frequency, you get to a place of trust. When people call me, they don't have to tell me, we want to see how good can you do this on a virtual platform. They have hundreds of videos they can watch. They've already watched it. So I think what happens, what I would suggest for people who are wanting to get into the global market is to actually get closer to them through your content by being consistent and by being frequent.
Wonderful. So, Anjali, as we kind of move forward, if I were to ask, if Anjali were to have a billboard message with her favorite quote or a message or a poem on that, what would that billboard message be showing up?
This is slightly longer, but it is one of my favorite quotes. Okay. And the thing is, when people read this, it's slightly long, so they don't read it completely. But I'm going to read it out to you, and I hope people find meaning in it. So, this was a quote that was by Theodore Roosevelt, and it goes like this. It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly. So essentially, the point of the quote is that it's not the critic who counts. It's not the person who sits in the seat of a theater and says, "Acha nahi kiya yaar, bekar tha." It wasn't as good. The credit belongs to the person who's in that theater, getting up, showing his or her art, fighting the fight, and producing content and making creative work and showing up regularly, even if this person is failing. Because even if this person is failing whilst daring greatly. Those who are sitting in the arena and just passing judgments, the credit doesn't belong to them. And I think that's been a huge learning for me and a strength to show up again and again.
Super, super lovely message out there, daring greatly. So, what is Anjali's destination postcard?
I don't think I've arrived to a destination postcard as such. I think there's still a long way to go. I'm just happy with the miles right now. I'm happy with crossing of every mile. I haven't yet developed the clarity on that's where it is. But one thing I know for sure in that mile, and I'm really proud of. So those are two very important things for me. That makes a difference to someone, and I look at it and I go, okay, this is my good work. I'm proud of this work because it is changing, making better things to make things better. If you know what I mean, to make better things to make things better. If I can continue to do that, then I'm really happy with it, and I'm just taking every mile as it comes. Not gotten to the destination postcard as yet.
Okay, and making things better is something that you have set out on, and one such thing is your upcoming book. You want to share some nuggets of what it is amongst our listeners?
Yeah, so the book is called Storied, and it's about driving your corporate success. So this book is obviously a very fine balance between a rational approach to storytelling and also a hugely emotional approach to storytelling, but in the corporate world. So it has three sections in it, three large parts in it. It starts with digital transformation. And yes, it gives you a very practical approach to how do you digitally transform organizations with the power of stories. But it also goes into the nuances like when that corporate politics exists, when that lack of trust exists, when that disbelief exists. Why does it exist? How do we unlock performance by unlocking people in the organization? Communication is transfer of emotions. Communication is a story only when you receive it. I can be saying whatever, But if you don't receive it, then it doesn't make a difference. So the first chapter is all about the insecurities and difficulties, and how leaders forget to actually see that when you talk about digital transformation, and how they can actually use stories to really help transform their organizations, unlock performance by unlocking people. So it's practical, but it also gets into the human psyche. The second section is the section that took me a really long time to write. I hated it every single day. Is a chapter on diversity, specifically focusing on gender diversity. Why is it that there are so many women who join the workforce but don't sustain it? Why is it that despite really great bosses who give really great opportunities, despite having, positions created for them, we are not able to avail them? What goes through the mind of the woman when she's put into these corporate sort of setups? The point of the second chapter is that you may have a knowledge of what it is to be a woman, but you don't have an understanding. Knowledge is gained by learning, understanding is gained through experiences. If you're not a woman, you don't have my experience. So you're not going to be able to understand me. You may have knowledge about me. So stories are a very good thing to be able to gap that problem, to create an understanding versus just lead in stories. And the final chapter is about data storytelling, but not for data analysts and data scientists and stuff. They know enough about data storytelling. What we're trying to do in the final chapter is to help non-data functions who are so nervous about data storytelling. How do they tell stories with data? So it's all about not using complex language, but using a very simple style to be able to bring data to life with stories. So Storied is about, yes, a lot of practical things about storytelling, but underlying, we have tried to uncover a human worldview and how people think the way they think, and how stories can help drive a better outcome for everyone.
And you will find the links of it as and when it gets published on the show notes. So with that said, Anjali, thanks so much for sharing so many stuff with us, from storytelling to the nuances of it to what does it take to succeed in a global environment. If there is one parting message to all the listeners out here, which is the Inspire Someone Today message, what's that message for the folks out here?
Okay, there are many messages that I can give, but I think the one that I really want to give is, if you're listening to me, most likely you are inclined towards the whole work world, and that's a space you're from, most likely. When you choose your path to success in life, there are three types of paths that you will come across. Path number one is, for everything, the answer is, when this happens, I'll do this, which is, okay, when I get someone to call me to write an article, I will write that article. When someone tells me you're going to get promoted, I will then move forward. When someone tells me, so waiting for someone else to make things happen for you, that's the first path. Always say no to that path. The second path is the path which is, I'll call, a very cluttered, messy, busy path. It's the path of the shortcuts. It's the path that a lot of people will take. So it's a very crowded path. So getting to success quickly, what that means is thinking about things like, for example, I'll put my post on LinkedIn and I'll join a pod. I'll get 20 people to like my post and make, trick the algorithm in that way. Or I'll get my friends and my family members to start commenting on that's a cluttered path, because it's an easy path. A lot of people do things like that. So you want to keep asking yourself, whether you're a student, whether you're a young aspiring writer, or whether you're a corporate professional, you want to say, am I taking this path because this is the shortcut? If the answer is yes, then it's going to be a very cluttered path. There are a lot of people on that path, and this path is full of stories of people who never made it to the end. And there's a final path, which is called the long, arduous, difficult, drip by drip path. I will write to my utmost, integrity. I will create content with my utmost sincerity. I will play no games and hack no systems. You're not going to see success quickly in that. You're going to see success in a long, long time. That is why consistency and frequency are going to be important. But when you hit success with that path, there are no returns. I am still on that path, the long, arduous, difficult path. of staying sincere and staying honest and staying right, not playing into the hacks, the hustles, and all the quick baits and clickbait sort of stuff. I think in the end, in this digitally advanced world, if you stay on the long, arduous path where you actually get satisfaction much later, you'll be a lot more thankful. Drip by drip, with patience, get there.
Anjali, it's not the hacks, it's the honesty. And that is what you have been able to share with all the listeners out here. Thank you so much for the passionate sharing of your journey and passionate sharing of what each one of us can accomplish if there is consistency, if there is enough frequency, then you build a trust and you have a long, arduous path of success. Thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure. Thank you to everybody listening. And thank you, Shrikant. It's an honor. Thank you.
Thank you for listening into today's edition of Inspire Someone Today. It's been a privilege to bring in these conversations. If you like this episode and have any feedback or comments, do mail me at inspiresomeonetodaypodcast@gmail.com. Inspiring someone is like creating ripples around us. If you like what you listen, feel free to share them and let's create ripples of inspiration. Do not forget to follow me on my Instagram handle @InspireSomeoneTodayPodcast for all the latest updates. This is Shrikant, your host, signing off, and until next time, keep inspiring.